Well, my fellow info warriors and truth seekers, we've got a real treat for you tonight in studio here in Austin, Texas. Here in the bunker with us is Dave Mustaine, founder of Megadeth, one of the first members of Metallica, known as one of the greatest guitarists of all time. And he's a patriot who loves liberty and loves this country and loves God. And I tell you, I love Dave Mustaine. He just ended his big Gigantor tour, huge success. David, it's great to have you here with us.
Thanks, Alex. Good to be here, finally.
Wow. So you just ended the tour here in Austin?
Yeah, Gigantor 2012 in North America we ended. There's no telling how much longer Gigantor will go in other countries and stuff like that, but this was the end of the beginning of this year. We started on Philadelphia over on the East Coast and worked up into Canada and across Canada pretty well. We have a Canadian drummer, so we all of a sudden became really huge up there. Good.
Is it just me, or is Megadeth getting bigger than ever? Because I hear about it all over the place. I hear it a lot more on the radio. You guys are so prolific, and stuff's even getting better.
I think we're getting more popular, but with what happened with unlocking, the recording industry and everybody being able to get records basically at will, we had to kind of focus more on the live aspect. So I think the hard work touring has paid off, because whether record sales help a band survive anymore or not, we're still able to continue to get out to the masses because, good times, bad times, people like entertainment. And the funny thing is, during, when it's considerably tougher times, heavy metal becomes more popular. So as things have kind of gone in a more difficult period, the same way it was during in the 80s, it's cyclical. It's the same stuff, and times are getting kind of tough now, and heavy metal is becoming much more popular again. Every record, it's kind of like a snapshot of your life, and you have to live life in between records to experience something, so that you're not just regurgitating the same stupid song and lyrics, 100 times, because people will eventually catch on to that. But there's also the fact that when people discover a band in the very beginning, that's the band that they hold on to. Very rarely do you see a band go 13 albums into their career like we have and still continue to generate new fans. And, although you do lose fans on the way, they grow up, people get married, their wives tell them to stop listening to metal, and, then that's the end of the story. Or, people just, they just start playing it themselves and don't listen to it because they make their own music. When MySpace came out, there was, I think at one time I remember there was a study, there was 8 million MySpace pages with people that had their own music uploaded onto it. And I was thinking, like, God, 8 million bands on there, and probably 750 or 7.5 million of them suck, because even that 500,000 that would have good stuff, you've got your whole life to write your first record, and when it's time to write your second one, that's when the pressure's on. It wasn't like we just got a different engineer. We had a new producer working with me, so in the beginning, it was kind of like, all right, who is this guy, Johnny K, and what's he all about, and he did Stained, and, that was kind of like those guys, and Metal is Us guys. So when Johnny came, he was recommended by our bassist, David Ellison. I didn't know anything about him. And, it was kind of like, two dogs kind of sizing each other up. Although we didn't get into it at all, we became, fast friends. There was some time where I thought, is this going to work? Because, we had 8 weeks to make the record, and we had to do 13 songs. And one of the songs had to be done immediately for Guitar Hero. And, for Konami. That was the Never Dead song. And Sudden Death had come out earlier that year. We started working on the song when David Ellison came back. We were in the process of doing it for the game, and it was going to be included in the record. So that was actually the first time that Ellison recorded with us again in 8 years.
In fact, I was going to bring that a point back. It's great to see David back in the band.
Yeah, he's a good dude. He's pretty funny. There's an irony about this guy. Like, he's studying to be a pastor, but he swears more than I do. you know, and he's in a 12-step program, but you know, he drinks coffee from morning till night, you know, and you know, good thing for me is we're friends. I've always cared about him, even during, you know, the period we went through where we were kind of estranged from each other, you know, because when you're in a band together, you guys become almost like, it's kind of like a weird marriage, so to speak, like a family kind of thing. You know, everybody always says that, but it usually it breaks up because, you know, families fracture. You can't always expect all four people to have the same viewpoint. And we didn't at a period of time, and me being the leader, I had to make some unpopular decisions. And of course, when things go wrong, you know, it's my fault. And when things go great, it's everybody's credit, you know. So I accepted that early in the game because I knew that was how things were going to be portrayed. And when we got back together again after, you know, all the lawsuit and stuff had happened, you know, Dave had, he was contrite about what, you know, had happened. His case against me got completely dismissed, and he actually got really hurt. The fans were really pissed at him for suing me. And I kept telling him, you know what, I love Dave. The sad thing is that, you know, the kids are getting hurt in this, you know. Funny thing is our kids are so resilient, they don't even think about it. They get together and they're just jumping on each other and, you know, acting like stupid kids so that, you know, it didn't even affect them. So I saw him at dinner one time and I said, you know, he said it was the dumbest thing he's ever done. And I said, I forgive you. And that was the beginning of the path back to him joining the band again. You know, we tried a couple of times to talk, and God's timing just wasn't right, you know. And when the time was right, it was effortless. He came in, he started playing. I was looking through my hair, kind of like trying to clandestinely check him out and see if he was, you know, having trouble or if he wasn't into it or if he was enjoying himself or whatnot. And it was pretty cool because it you know, give or take, you know, some hair colors changing or some hair loss. You know, we were like the same two kids we met when we met in Los Angeles back in the 80s.
I was about to say, it was great to see him back in the band because I'd always just seen him in photos and a couple of concerts where I'd seen him, you know, early on many years ago. And it was like, wow, I remember this guy too. This is even great. And he's such a nice guy. Dave, we haven't really gotten into politics yet in this interview, but you were telling me just basically about what happened with the whole Santorum thing. What went on there?
Well, you know, it's no secret I've been writing songs about not being happy with the way that the peasants are treated in the valley, you know, and being one myself, you know, the lyrics in Peace Sells talks a lot about what my beliefs are. You know, I go to work when I have to, I go to court when I have to, I pay my bills, you know, I believe in God, you know, all the things like our founding fathers would have been proud of, you know what I mean? And I was doing an interview with this guy, innocently enough. He asked me what I thought about the candidates. I went through the Republican candidates and said what I thought of each one at the time because it was during that horrible, embarrassing smear campaign that they were all waging towards each other. And I mean, seemingly like that everybody was just fighting instead of, you know, saying, well, yeah, he may have done this, but I believe this and I'm going to fight against Obama. You know, if
I told Ron Paul that last time he was on, I said, I get you guys all to fight with each other, but transcend, go after Obama. Yeah. That, you know.
Yeah, and it's not even going after Obama. It's going after the ideals that
Sure.
America was founded on, and that we, you know, we have a constitution. I saw a joke the other day. Someone said that I think Syria was writing a new constitution and that they could have ours because we don't use it anymore. You know, but to get back to the point, you know, I was just talking about the politics like I did when I did Rock the Vote, you know, and the second person who picked up the story said I endorsed Rick Santorum. And, you know, I put out a press release after that said I never used the word endorsed. I said that I liked the guy because he jumped off the campaign trail to go be with his sick daughter. Now, that to me, whether you're a football player or an astronaut, if you put your family first, you get kudos in my book.
You just had the 30-year reunion with Metallica, and you were telling me in the drive over here, well, that it was a testament, you know, to the fact that dreams really do come true.
Well, I think the point that this whole thing is it's closure. You know, it's very cathartic what took place. When we started off, there was 3 guys that You know, we didn't know what we were going to do. We just loved playing together. We loved fast and heavy music. And, you know, if you would have told us we would have changed the world and that every guitar playing kid from here to Timbuktu would be playing my style guitar playing, I would have said you're out of your mind, you know. But that's how it started. We were a three-piece. James sang, I played guitar, Lars drummed, and we had a bass player at the time that we changed for Cliff Burton, who we really wanted. And, you know, there was a lot of personality in the band, and we went our separate ways for quite a long time. There was the way that the public perceived us, the way that the press perceived us, and how we really are, you know, because we're friends. When we got back to each other, to playing with each other, it's kind of like, you know, we have this relationship that the public sees and that the press has and that we have, you know, and it's like the Jacari window, which is, you know, 4 different perspectives: how I see me, how you see me, how I think you see me, how you really see me thing, right? That's one of those weird perception things they teach you in psychology. And, you know, we have kind of a 3-dimensional way that our relationship is. And our private relationship, we've been friends ever since the day we met. You know, it's kind of like you see 2 people get together and they debate and they're vicious. And then after it's done, they shake hands like hockey players, you know, they'll have a beer after they knock each other's teeth out, you know. So we've always had that friendship, but the press has used what each one of us would say in jest about each other as real, you know, fiery ammo on each other, and just kind of kept it going, and the public bought into it. And I think the way that, you know, you can ask, is it real, is it over, is, you know, the Big Four stuff we did, and the 30th anniversary, which is totally different. You know, when we did the Big Four stuff, we played Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax on the same bill, several countries around the world. And when we did the 30th anniversary, it was just me and James and Lars on stage again. Sure, you know, there were other musicians there and stuff like that, but for me, for my heart, you know, when I got fired that day, there was so much I wanted to still do with those guys. And, you know, if I would have got a warning, it would have been different. I would have said, oh, well, sure, man, you know, I want to be in a band. I love this band. It's my band, too. And if my drinking's causing a problem, you know, I'll be comfortable doing something else, you know. But it didn't really happen that way. And